Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome to a brand new series, podcast, whatever we're calling it. We're not really sure. But this is something that I wanted to start and call it Raw Faith. Something where we just get on here, record, whether it's me by myself or today I got an amazing guest, my man, Matty B, addiction specialist himself. But yeah, just something where we just get on, get raw around faith. We're all around what's going on in our life that's tied to the spiritual journey. And today we are going to be getting raw around porn. Matt and I have both struggled with a porn addiction. So I'm excited to just dive into that because I know it just riddles, so many people in today's world. We're going to get into the statistics and everything. But Matt, what's going on, bro?
Morning, man.
Morning, dude. Got my grateful soup bowl.
Let's go. Multi-purpose, dude.
Yeah, I mean, you can't really tell how big this thing is, but it is huge. You don't know how many cups you're drinking. You're just drinking though.
That's what kind of coffee? Like you got a pot or do you have like a Keurig or what's your setup?
Yeah. So it's a pot and a like solo brew. Like you could do one cup on the side or a pot. Like there's two deals. So a pot. Um, McCafe from McDonald's is the type of coffee I be brewing.
Nice.
Now, is that the move? Probably not health wise, but I like the flavor of the black mid cafe. But I don't know. Like I drink water out of a glass jar. Considering cutting out my sparkling waters because of the BPA's in cans, like going all in on the health walk, of course. But I
hmm
drink Mid Cafe, maybe like my Achilles heel.
I mean, but so what are you saying that McDonald's beans aren't necessarily as healthy here as other beans?
I mean, it's McDonald's, I don't know. I have no idea. I mean, Ethan would probably be the guy to ask, knowing a lot about coffee, but I have
Right.
no idea. If you're somebody listening to this and drop it in the comments what kind of coffee we should be drinking. What kind do you drink?
Oh man, what kind do I get? Um, Dude, I'll typically try and get like whatever's on sale just because some of the brands can get expensive, man. So I think I get 5 o'clock. It's like a red bag at the grocery store a lot of times.
Okay.
That's a good one. I would say in terms of like, you got your black rifles and like the serious, like all these serious brands, and then you got your freaking Folgers down here or whatever. I would say I'm a little above the Folgers game, but not like too far up.
I'm definitely right there with Folgers.
Yeah, yeah.
The McCafe. Yeah. I mean, anything McDonald's does is probably just not healthy. That's the assumption, right? But
Yeah, I
dude,
hate to
let's
say.
uh
Yeah, go ahead.
let's rip this band-aid into the porn talk.
Yeah.
So we kind of got some outlines, some notes, because this is actually a call that we did inside of Elevate. So we didn't want to record that as our call because it was just an intimate, vulnerable space inside the community for guys who are part of the group who are struggling with porn, like many of us are, to be able to jump on and share their stories themselves and share their struggles, so we could kind of, go around the room and talk about it. So already got the outline from that call, but we're excited to use this outline to run through the podcast today. But I just want to open this thing up with just getting vulnerable around my story. Just hope that helps everyone listening to this. Just kind of get down on our level of where we're at and where we're kind of talking from, and maybe open up their hearts, open up their ears a little bit to what we have to say. Because I started watching porn at 11 years old. Um, which the more I say that, like I haven't told this kind of side of my story much, like the porn side, or I've shared my story a lot. And I never really mentioned this because, and I feel like I don't even mention it because it's so normal in the world that it doesn't even seem like a big deal.
Hmm.
Which, like, I think that was even my mindset before, but now the more that I'm talking about it, just the more I see guys are like, wow, like I've struggled with that. Like so many guys, time and time again, able to relate and really hear me out. But My parents got divorced when I was 11. Um, Now, do I know if that's why I started watching porn? I don't know. Like I don't know. It's just really like when your parents get divorced, you start like I got a phone at that time. So I think it was more so I just got access, and I was hitting sixth grade, and where I'm from, like fifth and sixth grade, that splits up. So like you go from elementary school to middle school, and you're in with sixth, seventh, and eighth graders all in one building. So I get around the eighth graders, the older people at the time who I think most guys probably start watching porn or introduced, to the conversation or shown something around middle school, if not early high school. So I kind of got exposed to that. Dudes are starting to hit puberty, starting to learn about, some stuff and get that exposure. So I started watching at 11. And then, yeah, I mean, it was something that I struggled with for nearly a decade. Happy to say I'm about a year free from that. So that's exciting, man. It's something where you don't even have to worry about it. It's such a weight off the shoulders. And I know we'll get more into kind of that story, that walk, but just wanted to kind of give my timeline. Figured you'd share yours as well.
Absolutely, man. First and foremost, just appreciate you sharing. I think one thing you said there, especially when it comes to pornography, I mean, I think there's another layer of secrecy and like darkness when it comes to something like that. Just with the people dynamics of like, guys can maybe be more open and vulnerable about something like this. But like to me, I would never like this is not something I would really go and vocalize to many women out there. Just as like I feel like the intergender dynamics with something like this is a little tougher too. So yeah, being at this point where we're able to obviously come on here and talk about this, and whoever's listening, whether it be guy, girl, um, it's just it's a blessing to be at this point where we're able to chat about this. And even on the call this past week, like being able to just have a group of guys come in, have that vulnerable space and be able to lead that for them, for guys on different parts of their journey. It doesn't matter where they were. Just being able to
Yeah.
lead that was a really cool experience. At least for me, geez, I want to say I'm right around the same age as you, probably like 12, 13, right around that eighth grade, freshman year, high school, like upgraded from the, like one of those phones where you like flipped it to the side so you could text people or whatever. And then I finally got my first iPhone, I think, going into high school from what I remember. Or even if it was like an iTouch or something, like whatever they had, that was like the music player, but you could still get on the internet and stuff. Like, that was pretty much the first time for me, and I think it's a combo like what you said. I think there was some trauma going on in my life, that I've been able to come and realize, as I've really reflected kind of on my initial dive into pornography. But also I think it was just some natural like feelings of didn't have a lot of talks with my dad or maybe like trusted mentors as I was growing up about like what is sex, like from the faith perspective, um especially of just like, hey, like how am I supposed to navigate this as a young adult, as a teenager growing up? What am I supposed to think, like what's allowed, what's not allowed? Um and and I think that contributed maybe to me looking to pornography as being like, nah, not like a teacher, but almost just like like this will be a little opening into what I can expect when I get older. So I think that definitely played a role as well. Um, but yeah, struggled for, gosh, I think I'm at 13 years, like 12 to 25 was really just a lot of ups and downs there. It's not like, some periods were very consistent, like, multiple times a day. Other periods it was like, all right, maybe like every couple weeks go by and it's like, all right, then I'll watch or something. So there were different time periods depending on the season, but it was a constant thing for those 13 years for me. Um, and then just, man, as I got to my faith and growing as a man over the past couple years, just went to war, as we'll get into the war. that is this battle with pornography, and just a blessing to be here again, talking about this from the other side now, having conquered that.
Yeah. I think that's something that I really want to highlight. Like this absolutely is a war. And two things when I think of war, I think of one, never letting your guard down. If you think about war, like it's something where if you're at war, you're at war. Like they live and breathe war. I've never been to war, so I'm not gonna act like I know war. But you watch the
Right.
movies, and of course, like I'm not trying to like water down war at all because I don't even want to go in there. But what I'm saying from a war perspective on the porn scene is you cannot let your guard down. And then another thing when I think about wars, I think about going in the trenches with other people, with other men. And that's something that you and I have done, even to make the decision of like, hey, we're going to abstain from sex until we get married. Like, it's something where, I remember the day I made that decision. I'm on the phone with you. We're talking about it. I'm on the phone with Peyton, with Austin, like, ton of dudes inside the Elevate squad. And it's a war, battle against lust, battle against the devil. Like, it's a war. So you need other people around you to go to war with. And I'm grateful for yourself and those guys. But two things you mentioned when you were kind of talking there is I didn't even, and of course this is true, but I didn't even consider this until you were saying it. But like you had said, eighth grade, early freshman year, kind of when you went from a flip phone to, a smartphone, whatever that looked like at the time, or an iPod, basically a smartphone, if you got
Right.
the Wi Fi. But for me, you're like what, 6, 7 years older than me. So iPhones were like, I remember when I went into sixth grade, I believe we were on the iPhone 5. So, like, kids were getting these iPhones so early. I remember people even having iPhones, if not iPods. I had an iPod like what, fourth grade, third grade, fourth grade. Like, so I had access to the internet at a very young age. And, I think you even see it today, like even past me looking down at younger
Mm.
generations, like the juuling and the vaping and even smoking weed, like the pens or the weed pens or whatever. Like it's crazy to think about. And even like my dad being a police officer, I've talked to him a little bit, but like even like the drug scene is getting younger, and it's getting into the middle schools, and I don't know
Mm.
about the elementary schools. I imagine, but like everything's just getting younger due to the access, the easy access to technology, and I think porn, is at the leader of that,
Right.
getting younger. So it's really interesting, how technology is such a double-edged sword, of our generation, and as it continues to grow. I mean, with this AI stuff, it's crazy what's coming, but it's such a double-edged sword because there's so much benefit. And then another thing you kind of said that stuck out to me was your dad. You never really had that conversation with your dad, right? And I wouldn't say I did either. Again, 11, parents got divorced. My dad was kind of out of the picture. He had to kind of distance himself because there was a lot of, he was the one who left, right? So we kind of blamed him for a lot of things. So we distanced ourselves maybe a little more. But you never had that conversation. And something that I've really been looking into recently is just like this generational trauma, like studying it, researching it. It's something I'm so fascinated with because I mean, that I love relationships. I love relationship dynamics as a whole. And I think it's so cool to see just how generational trauma just gets passed down. Obviously not cool, but for me it's cool. Might be a little weird in saying that, but one podcast that I heard, from the author of the book "Unf Yourself," he said that when we are trying to change generational curses, we try to change circumstances, and he said circumstances don't change anything. He was saying it's the meaning that's defined behind the circumstances. He referred to it as the mechanism. And he said, that's kind of why you can see people who grow up in extremely wealthy homes or extremely, poor families, people with parents who are married, people with parents who are divorced, and they can still result in the same outcome with their same meaning that they've defined to
Mm.
life. He's like, the circumstances don't matter. He said, but so often when we're trying to break these generational curses, we try to break the generational circumstances. I was poor. My kids are going to have wealth. Like, my parents are divorced. I'm going to stay married. Like, we just try to just change everything. And, and so when you're saying you didn't have that conversation with your dad, I think that that is so important because I think, I'm not a parent, you're not a parent, but in my just researching this is like, who is supposed to define meaning and tell us what the world means? It's our parents. Like they are the ones who are supposed to, when we experience something, when we're getting exposed to porn in those middle school years or whenever it's happening, your parents are supposed to be there to talk to you about like, hey, this is what porn is. This is what it means. This is why you should stay away from it. Like, and I'm not knocking on my parents or your parents or any parents out there, but just
Yeah.
thinking about how I'm going to parent the future is like, when I was 11, my parents get divorced. My mom starts picking up the bottle. Like, I had nobody telling me what that meant. It was up to my 11-year-old brain to perceive that and to interpret that and to just develop my perception of the world based on what I was exposed to. I had nobody kind of filtering, auditing, defining, uh, and obviously that can go right into the faith talk of you audit the word of God. That's how you should teach your kids is take their experiences, filter it through the Bible, and give them the meaning of what the Bible says about these things. So I just thought, two powerful points there that I think are so big, especially even in the porn scene, is just access to, the internet at such a young age, and then not really getting meaning defined to what we're perceiving as young kids.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Well said. Well said. I think, geez, something that scares me a little bit on the technology side of things. You talk about that double-edged sword. I mean, right. I was probably right at that, almost like, inflection point where like, I was still getting into high school, but now it's like, it's pushed those where people are getting cell phones, even younger now. Um, Not just that, but with what COVID did, a lot of people like you have the online learning now, and this goes not only college, this is like nobody could go to school. So you're talking elementary school kids, like middle schools, high school. Like my uncle's a teacher, and he says, we got to make sure we got computers for the kids now. Like, so if they need to take them home or something like that, like they can potentially have that option to them too. Um,
Mm.
so just technology has integrated itself even into schools so much more than like, I'm used to sitting in a classroom, teachers, maybe she's got like a digital board that they can write on or something so that we can take notes. But that was pretty much the extent of it. Now I
Yeah.
think from what I'm gathering with schools, it's like it's a lot of even just I don't know if it's PowerPoints or whatever kids are doing through their individual computers. So you have all that to now worry about too.
I think for people even reference here, I graduated high school of 2020. Um, I had a computer from sixth grade on. A school provided computer that I had throughout the school year. Took home, was up to me to charge it. And at the end of the school year, you turn it in, go away from the summer, and then you come back, you get a new one, whatever. But
Hmm.
yeah, I had a computer even sixth grade on, and sixth grade for me was 10 years ago. So 2013. That was 10 years ago, and I had a computer that entire time. And I even remember, um, this was crazy, but one of my seventh grade teachers got arrested for having a relationship with one of my classmates. I'll leave it at that. And I remember even in that classroom, I don't know if it was pertained to that relationship at all, but someone had Googled like on their school computer, like I think like how to kill someone or something, like in seventh grade, like sitting in the back of the classroom. I don't know who it was or the context, how
Hmm.
things get spread in middle school, but
Yeah.
someone had Googled that and they came in, they took the kid away and they confiscated like the computer, took the computer from him, whatever. And then we like never saw the kid again. Like it was a thing where I
Hmm.
don't know where he went, but like even thinking about that, just that access to information, like even from that frame, like kids are so curious, right? Like even as sons of God, like we are so curious and we are going to push the boundaries. Something that PD Kinder talked about recently that I loved was just like even as adults, we are still sons of God. We are still children of God. It's like we're still curious and we are still going to push boundaries. The boundaries of
Mm.
porn, the curiosity of googling like how to kill someone. Like, is something wrong with that kid? I don't know. Not for me to determine, but curiosity at the end of the day. Like, he could have watched a show on Netflix the night before, just overhearing his parents, like these, I don't know, like Dexter is the first show that comes to mind. My mom used
Mm-hmm.
to watch that. I hated that show. It's just so
Mm-hmm.
sick seeing him
Mm-hmm.
kill all these people. But, you get exposed to something like that. You have a computer from school in fifth, sixth grade. You come in. My little sister, she's in kindergarten right now. She has a computer. Kindergarten. She gets 20 minutes for a recess. That's a complete sidebar, but man, I hate that, bro. 20 minutes. She's like 6 years old, dude. And then they're trying to diagnose him with, like ADHD and stuff. Like 20 minutes for a recess and trying to diagnose her with ADHD. Not her specifically, but,
Right.
they're like, you give her 20 minutes outside, expect her to sit for 8 hours a day. She's 6 years old.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah. Well, dude, and even my girlfriend just kind of gives me this frame of reference, which was eye opening. Just from an adult perspective, it's like we wake up in the morning and we check our mobile device. Then we go to work. Just to most of us, y'all entrepreneurials are a little different. But in this aspect, you might be actually some similarities between corporate world and entrepreneurs. You're in front of a screen for multiple hours a day. Maybe it's a computer or a
Oh,
laptop.
yeah.
So you got that aspect to it. Then she's like, people come home and they sit in front of a television at night, and basically it's a go to bed, wake up, rinse and repeat. So to think about just how common it is to have some sort of a screen in front of our face for multiple hours a day is just like, yeah, it's all too common, especially in America. I don't know about other countries, but
I'm sure it's all the same.
right.
Um, yeah, let's put a pin in the whole screens and technology because I know we're about to come back to it. But let's pick back up on our walk of porn here, going through. So I know next the first question we had here and that we kind of opened up our call with was just like, what do you believe from your perspective is the biggest thing that you leverage to overcome your porn addiction? Struggling for 13 years, like that's a long battle. That's a deeply embedded thing in your life. Like, what do you think is the biggest contributing factor?
Man, that's such a good question too. Um, I would say there's two things I like to focus on. And as I've gone down my journey, just with addictions in general, I mean, geez, uh, it started for me just I wouldn't say I was necessarily addicted to alcohol, but definitely had some abuse there during my college years, early 20s. Um, just struggled with smoking weed for eight plus years. Um, I always thought of addiction first and foremost on the substance side of things. And that's a lot of what they teach you, right? Where it's like, okay, like, hey, like drugs and substances are foreign coming into the body, like, and how that can impact you and what it does to your brain, what it does to your body, and how you can actually become addicted to it. But for me, as I started to clear those hurdles and overcome those struggles and challenges, then my focus started to turn to like, okay, what are some other aspects of my life maybe that I'm addicted to? Like we just talked about with technology, am I relying on social media too much? Um,
Yeah.
things like pornography, the digital addictions. So as my focus started to turn to those, it was a real eye opener where I was like, hey, like, am I addicted to this? Can I go an extended period of time without it? And for a long time in the midst of that battle for me, it was like a cycle of like, okay, maybe I'd be able to go to week. Then it was like, all right, relapse, boom, back on the train. Then it was like, all right, maybe I can extend this out to 2 weeks. And then boom, relapse. Like, got to start over.
Yeah.
Um, But I think just to answer your question, it was this idea of how can I be a better man, physically, mentally, spiritually, and maybe for I mentioned this on the call to the guys. I was like, hey, like physically improving yourself, I feel like is a very easy thing to grasp, right? Like start going to the gym, measure your gym goals, your fitness goals, start eating better, get your nutrition dialed in, get a consistent sleep schedule. Like I think it's very easy to see if I'm getting better or not in the physical department, just as a guy or girl.
Yeah.
Um, but then when I tried to answer this whole like, am I improving mentally and spiritually? Like at first I threw that out there and I didn't even know like what that meant. Like I'm like, okay, it sounds good. Like I'm getting better in these areas, but like, what does that actually mean? So then
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, well, I got to take what I want out of my life, like another layer deeper and define that. Um, and I think there was some journaling and thought processing that I was able to work on, and I'm still working on the mental, emotional side of things, but especially in the spiritual realm. Um, that was when we had first gotten connected, and started to really just tune into church and dive into faith, reading the Bible more. Um, so I think just from the faith aspect, that was able to better define um, my spiritual development and growth. And almost just like naturally, I started hearing sermons about pornography, about lust in general, started getting introduced to those Bible verses about lust. And that was when it really just like started to hit me like a freight train, where it was like, hey, if I'm going to start to walk in this way in my life, um, then pornography just can't stay. I have to address it. I can't just act like it's not there anymore. So, yeah, I would say that's the big thing for me. Just wanting to be a better man here on this earth, day in, day out.
Something you mentioned right at the end there was, like sermons, like start hitting you. When you're reading the Bible, like you start getting convicted with like, wow, I gotta overcome this addiction. Like things just start, coming your way. Like God starts lining things up in your life that are just supporting you and pushing you and convicting you. And I think it's like the classic example of like wanting to buy a car. Like if you don't want to buy a car, you don't notice the car that you want on the road. But for me,
Mhm.
like for example, I'll use a Jeep for example. Like I'm a massive Jeep guy, so I know that one day my dream car, as simple as it may sound, I'm in no rush to get there. But one day my dream car, Jeep Rubicon, blacked out, red leather seats, like no doubt about that. And so every time I see a blacked out Jeep Rubicon or Jeep Rubicon in general, I notice it. I pick up on it. But if I didn't have my intentions set with that's what I wanted in my life in my future, you think I would see the Jeep? No, I absolutely wouldn't. You think I would see even the opportunities that may lead me to the Jeep? Probably not. But with what you're saying, like you defined who it is you wanted to become, and that was a man who was porn free, amongst other things as well. And then your intentions were set with what you wanted in life, so you start seeing a life, a vision without porn in it, and then you also start seeing the opportunities to overcome and educate yourself against porn with sermons, with scripture, with community. You start having the conversations, like, so I think just for somebody listening to this, like the point I really want to get across is like same thing with when you're buying a car. Like once you start setting your intentions about a car, you start seeing it on the road everywhere. So set your intentions that you want to overcome this porn addiction, or of course you can apply that mental framework to anything. It goes beyond porn. And very in alignment with your answer, I believe the biggest contributing factor to me overcoming my porn struggles was a vision of who I wanted to be. Like, and I think any self development book, course, what have you, stems from having a vision and pulling things out of that vision and applying them to your life. If you vision of fresh fade in your higher self, your highest self, go get that fresh fade. If you vision whatever it is, a body, like in the easier things to vision are the easier things to achieve. those should be the things that we go achieve first. And that's why you're saying with fitness, it's so easy to vision a healthy body, and it's so easy to know the inputs of getting there. It's not like building a business where there's a lot more gray area, confusion, what have you. A body is so straightforward. Everyone knows if we eat some steak, some salmon, a little bit of noodles, some veggies, like we're gonna achieve the body. If we're hitting the gym, like it's so straightforward of how to get that. So just like with a vision, things you can see the clearest, go get those first. And for me, that's what I did. And it was not porn first. I didn't give up porn until 2023, the start of 2023. But I had a vision of the man I wanted to become. And I went and pursued the easiest things first, which I think everyone should do. And so I had a lot of proof of like, hey, I am this guy that I vision. I have a lot of things that are in alignment with that. I have really deep relationships. I have a body that is in alignment with the body that I dream of having. Like, and the list could go on. Like, Elevate was over 100 members. Like, I built something in this community. Like, I have a lot of proof to back my vision. Next domino I got to knock down and kick out of my life, porn. And the vision keeps expanding as you continue to grow, of course. And it became a point where my vision was so strong and I was so convicted in it that conviction and that faith led me to just be able to put my porn struggle and my vision side by side and just say, okay, this is an easy choice. Next. Like that was what it came down to one day. Now that was after a decade of watching porn and 2 years, 3 years of like extreme, intense, day in and day out, brick by brick type of self development. And then
Right.
it came to the point where I had so much evidence stacked towards my vision where I was like, okay, I am that guy. I don't have to struggle with this anymore. And a ton of growth in the faith where I was able to walk with God and really put it on Him and be like, hey, I need your strength here. And I think that that's another big piece, which we're going to dive a lot deeper into after this. But also at that time, I'm talking with Joey, with Gabe, with Payton, with yourself. Like we're having these conversations around these struggles with porn. We're talking about the man we want to be. We're talking about the struggles and obstacles we're facing in getting there. We're having deeper conversations. We're talking about our vision. Like and that's why I've dedicated my life to community because it's changed my life. Like I have a personal testimony to community. So it's like I want everybody to experience this and belong to something that's greater than themselves and be able to have these deep, vulnerable conversations. So a lot in that that we're definitely about to unpack more. But yeah, vision. I think everything has to stem from a vision, and I think it applies to every single thing that you want. Whether it's overcoming addiction, whether it's building a business, whether it's building a relationship, like you have to know where it's going to get it there, and you also have to be willing to pivot and adjust and submit to God's will. Like you can, man playing God laughs. Like, and I think also the closer you get to God, the more you're in His Word, the more you're talking about your vision, like the more refined you get and get in alignment with God's vision for what He has for you. I do believe God gives us vision. Um, so yeah, vision, 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 vision.
For sure.
Just get that point across.
Yeah, man. Well said. I think, just personally for my story too, I've gotten asked this a couple times from people where it's like, yeah, like with your struggles, on the substances side with pornography, like, do you think it's possible to overcome like multiple things at once? And I'm not gonna sit here and say that that's not possible. Um, like when can someone overcome an alcohol addiction and a marijuana addiction at the same time? Like, just boom, instantly be
So
healed of that. Like, yeah, go ahead.
you're saying from the addiction perspective solely, or just like I guess
Yeah,
overcoming multiple addictions at once?
yeah,
Okay.
right. And I gave it some thought because, like, at least for me, it was kind of like a one by one deal. Like, and I was able to stack that momentum and just improve upon my vision. Where, like, okay, starting with alcohol, um, you, it was just like you said, with being able to see that vision easier. Like alcohol, it's like, okay, I got to go to liquor store. I got to take money out of my bank account. I got to pay, go purchase beer or a bottle or whatever, and then bring it home and ultimately drink it. Weed, it's like the same way. It's like you got to go to the bank account, got to go to a dispensary, you got to go get your, like, it was clear, very clear for me to see the steps that led me to going down that path and ultimately reorient my path to no longer be doing those things. I think with pornography, the question I had to ask myself was just like, how far am I willing to go to remove something out of my life? And it was just so hard with pornography, where it was like, I had to ask myself the questions of like, okay, am I going to, limit browser history, or like what I can search on a browser? Like, am I going to open up my browser history to other people now to hold me accountable? Like, am I going to be having these vulnerable conversations with other guys? Like, and at first it freaked me out. It was like, that little thing inside of me, that maybe it's the devil or just that selfishness inside of you, right? It's just like, nah. Like, you don't have to do that. You don't have to let people into your browser history. Like, don't open up about your struggle to other guys. Like, just keep it inside. And that's what was leading me in that constant relapse cycle, was just like I'd fall and I'd stumble, and then I'd tell myself, all right, I'll be better next time. And like, I'd try harder. Like, I just put so much pressure on myself. And I would just constantly be falling. So pornography was definitely an area where, like, I saw the vision, but I almost didn't want to acknowledge the steps that I needed to take to get there, if that makes
I
sense.
love that, dude. Like what you're saying about putting more pressure on yourself. How often do we do that? Like think about what you're saying there. And this is for me, this is I can relate so much. That's why I'm getting fired up about this. Is like you say, "All right, I'm done with porn." Then you go watch porn. Then you're like, "Oh, I just watched porn. Like, oh, I gotta be harder on myself. Like, I gotta batten down the hatches. Like, come on." You start beating yourself up. Now, the next time you're tempted to watch porn, you just added a whole nother layer of pressure and stress onto yourself. You think it's gonna get easier or harder? It gets a lot harder because, and this is something that I've really defined faith as, is because you do see that vision of the man you want to become. That's the stress you're feeling of achieving that. And you can't achieve that without God. You can't achieve that without
Mm.
community. So if you try to achieve that on your own, guess what? Like you just said, porn again, porn again, porn again. And every time you try to just do it alone, do it alone, do it alone, the pressure just stacks even higher. And then you're just adding so much more weight to these decisions that you're making to watch porn or what have you. And I just think that is big. You just add so much more stress and so much more pressure to every single time you say you're not going to watch porn and you don't reach out to somebody, you don't, give it to God, like you don't lean into faith, like you just are making it harder on yourself. And it's just so apparent. And I think that this is the reason we're on here recording this is to get guys to feel comfortable, more comfortable with one joining Elevate and reaching out to some guys who can support you in even more than just an addiction. Obviously, we're here talking about porn, um, and that being the main topic of our conversation. But this goes for any struggle. If you sit here and say, okay, I'm just gonna be harder on myself and I'm just gonna just do XYZ, like no, you need to change your actions. You need to change your behavior to change who you are. And the only way you're going to do that is through finding other people who have overcome these things through leaning into God. Stop trying to just freaking stack the chips on your decision making because it's just, I don't care who you are. Like, you're just not, this is not happening. So stop doing it.
Yeah, one of the classes I took last year, just um, where when you're trying to make change, a lot of people go right to that action. Um, like, all right, I'm going to take different actions, and that's warranted. Like, that needs to happen. But then there's also a couple other pieces there which I think you're hinting on and have talked about is just your resultant beliefs about something, and then your resultant identity of just who you are. Where right, and if you don't hit all three of those, that's where that dissonance comes into play, where it's like, okay, um, I, you won't take the consistent action because you haven't defined who you want to be, the beliefs you want to have about something. So it's like, okay, I don't want to watch porn, or I'm not going to watch porn anymore. Okay, well then, what are your beliefs around pornography, and then what is your identity about who you want to like? I am someone who doesn't watch pornography, or I am someone who lives porn free. I think you have to hit all three of those to be able to make that change stick.
Yeah. And if you're somebody wondering, like, what beliefs do I need to adopt? What beliefs do I need to have? The Bible.
Right, right.
Like, the Bible. Those are the beliefs. Those are the truth. That is how Matt and I have both overcome, the porn addiction is, okay, I take the beliefs from the Bible that I need to adopt. The Bible will literally tell you what man you need to be, aka Jesus. He walked as the vision, and you go take the lessons of his life and you apply them to yours. And of course, that's a very high bar to set that we are never going to reach. But that's what we have to sit out and set out for every single day, and brick by brick try to achieve. Like, that is what we were placed here to do, is to try to achieve that and to help others achieve that. Like, the end goal of this life is not to make a ton of money, or I don't know, drive the nicest car, or have a ton of deep relationships. Like, all these things are great, and all these things are even greater if they align with the ultimate end goal of get into heaven. Like, that is it. So it's like, and once you start thinking about that, like, that changes a lot of things in your life. I really think, like, for me, I've really thought about that, like even through seasons of struggle, financial struggle with lust, struggle with porn, like whatever. I'm like, is this refining me to become the man I need to be to get into heaven? Answer is always yes. Okay, great. I can really be grateful for this struggle. Cool. Let's lean in even harder and learn everything that I can take away from this struggle,
Mm.
because that is how I'm going to become the man who gets into heaven. And that is above all else. Nothing else matters. Like, our time here is just a blimp, in comparison to eternal life that we are promised. But I think this is just a perfect segue to go into, the story of David, and just kind of bring up some of those, Bible stories and topics there. So you want to share that story?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And even just to we had on the call on Monday, we had gotten into David and Bathsheba. I had another one in reserve to talk about too, but I mean, we were hitting that one so well. But just when you're talking about
Yeah.
becoming more like Jesus, I mean, first and foremost, just with his Sermon on the Mount in Matthew, I think it's Matthew 5 is where he gets into lust. Man, I remember hearing this was AB Aaron Brockett at Traders Point just give a sermon on lust and anger from Jesus, from his Sermon on the Mount. And dude, I've probably seen that sermon, oh my gosh, at least 35 times, maybe more. Who the heck knows at this point, just going through that, dude. Oh, seared into my brain,
I've
but
I've
oh,
never watched a sermon more than 5 times, probably.
oh my gosh, dude. There were, I don't know, it was just that initial time in my faith where I'm exposed to something like this, and it's almost like my brain was like, I'm hearing it, convicted on it, but I need to hear it again. And it was just this constant like refreshing of listening to this, and refining, molding myself and my beliefs into who I wanted to be going forward. But man, AB just like, he goes through Jesus's teachings on it, and Jesus is like, like gouge out your eye, cut off your arm, like that's better than eternally damning yourself to hell. And I remember, Aaron kind of made the joke of it during the sermon. He was like, well, Jesus, he's not literally saying cut out your eye or chop off your arm. And he's like, if that was the case, we're probably missing the most important part of our body that we should cut off. And he kind of just chuckled, and the church audience chuckled a little bit with that too. Um,
Yeah.
but it's that deeper meaning of the heart posture, where it's like, like, how far are you willing to go to mold yourself more into like who Jesus is asking you to be in the Sermon on the Mount. So I highly encourage, just, go read Matthew 5 there when it comes to lust. But back to Mr. David and Bathsheba. I think this is in 2 Samuel. I think it's chapters 11 and 12. You're talking about another character in the Bible. This is now before Jesus, but Jesus is from that lineage of David, this really holy family, starting all the way up from Adam, Eve, going down to Abraham, all the way now to David, getting on the way to Jesus. So just a very godly man in the Old Testament. He wrote the Psalms, or some of the Psalms. Just he was a king. He was the one God empowered to sling that stone at Goliath. David has that faith to go to war with this giant of a man. Like, who else is gonna go up there and be like, all right, one, go fight this guy, but then two, not even bring a sword or any like serious weapon. Like, nah, I'm gonna bring a slingshot and a rock, and I'm gonna trust that God is gonna strike this giant down. Does that, right? And is just like, becomes the king. Everybody loves this guy, and rightfully so, like godly in so many ways. But then in 2 Samuel here in chapters 11 and 12, just gets into a place where he is not supposed to be. Not living up to the vision that you had just outlined for who David, God had placed David here to be. And was basically up on his rooftop, his kingdom rooftop, wherever he was chilling in his palace or what have you, and looks down and sees this woman bathing, being Bathsheba, and just is immediately, transfixed. And I think an important point that Aaron mentioned in his sermon was just like, hey, like, where is that line about what's acceptable as a man or individual and what's not? And it's okay to be overcome with that, like, whoa, like somebody's attractive, like you think somebody is absolutely beautiful, which is fine. It's where you go from there. It's where you let your thoughts go. It's where you let your actions go after that, which is what we see David do, unfortunately, where he has a servant or someone basically go get Bathsheba, bring Bathsheba to him. He then has sex with Bathsheba, impregnates her. She gets pregnant as a result of them having intercourse, and she's married to another guy. And it just continues on now to this place where David sends her husband out to battle, basically plots to kill him off so he doesn't find out about what happened between David and Bathsheba. That happens. And then just, basically tries to cover it up, acting like God can't see any of this going on. But he's just out there trying to cover his tracks to the best he can. I think he marries Bathsheba. So he's like, all right, like we're just gonna cover up any sin or wrongdoing. Nobody's gonna find out about this. And then eventually a prophet, I think his name's Nathan, comes to David, and God sends Nathan to David. And Nathan gives this whole parable analogy. Like, it's not David's situation, but it's like a different parable. And Nathan explains it to David, and David gets all fired up. He's like, oh, like, tell me who this individual is, like, that's doing this. Like, we're going to go take care of this guy. Like, acting like, oh, it's not him. And then Nathan kind of just looks at David and he's like, bro, like, this story is about you. And like, immediately David finally gets hit. Like, that's the humbling moment, right? Like, all those selfish actions that he had taken, trying to go about it his own way, boom, humbled. And immediately hit with guilt, regret, just that sin convicts him. And he confesses it to God. He's like, fine, like, hey, like, God dang, like, I see what I did now, as being bad. And we can, I'll leave it there. We can get into the consequences of David's actions, just to briefly mention, like, it's not like, because God did favor David very much, but
Yeah.
it's not like there were not any consequences that came as a result of the actions David took. Like Nathan basically said, the son that David and Bathsheba was going to have died. That happened. And there were some other things that happened in David's family that were pretty tragic and just not good things after the fact that happened as a result of his actions. So briefly, just to mention, I don't think sin doesn't come without consequence. Like, yes, it is right to bring that to God, but I think that there could be consequences as a result. Yeah, man. Let's what are your thoughts kind of on that story and the situations there?
So much to unpack there. Kind of staying right there at the end point you just made about sin and consequences. I think something that's so big, we often think about consequences of our sin as Christians, right? But we don't think about the reward from our restraint from sin ever. Like ever. And so, again, we're talking about vision. Vision is what you believe is the reward. So, if you're going to abstain from porn, from sex, whatever, then you believe that more than likely, one, you're going to rid the devil of your that aspect of your life, and two, you're going to have a godly relationship with a woman and have a godly marriage. Like you're going to have a marriage that honors God and points people to heaven. And that's what we're here to do. So, like, I think that is a big thing. We have to not always sit there and just think about the consequences, but we have to think about the reward. What is on the other side of our restraint? And it's something far greater than we can even define or imagine. Absolutely. And P.D. Kinder heard a sermon on this not too long ago, and he really boiled it down to the three R's. And he said, restraint leads to reward. R, restraint. Like you must believe that. You must believe that. You must have faith in that. Number two, the second R, and this is really a framework to overcome, lust, what have you. So restraint being one, remind being the second one. And he said, again, we are children. We push the boundaries. He said, you hear parents of this world tirelessly remind their kids, don't do that. Hey, Matt, don't touch the stove. Hey, Matt, stop doing that. Hey, Matt, stop touching that. Stop licking that. Stop doing that. Stop writing on the walls. Like, stop, 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 stop. Constantly, tirelessly reminding the kids of where the boundaries are. Stop doing that. Stop doing that. And he's like, the same thing. We are children of God. We need to remind ourselves tirelessly where the boundaries are. And he was saying, from a marketing perspective, everyone says, like, once you go, and this may be kind of me applying my thought process here. He didn't really, he went on this a little bit, but this is my thoughts expanding on his point. But from
Yeah.
a marketing perspective, they say, like, when you go blue in the face, that's when people are finally starting to hear your message. So same thing with your boundaries. When you feel blue in the face and you're so tired and sick and tired of reminding yourself of where those boundaries are, guess what? You're finally starting to hear those. So restraint, remind, and then release regret was the last one. So restraint, remind, release. Release regret being the last one. And this one I think is so big, so vital, because David here has sex with Bathsheba, doesn't release that regret. He even goes to the point where he's willing to get her husband killed off to cover it up because he can't release that regret. He can't let it come out into the light, right? Like he's got to keep it in that dark corner that God can't see. Of course, God saw it, right? We all know that. God, there's no, for anybody listening, there's no dark corners that God can't see. He knows all, even knows our thoughts. So, like, releasing that regret. If David had the power, the strength, and the faith to be able to release that regret in the moment, what could have happened there? He may have slipped up and sinned, and it may have been horrible. But if he could have released that regret, he could have at least stopped his sinful nature there, stopped his sinful actions there, and honored God with his actions past that moment. So those three R's are something that I've really implemented in my life, and they've been huge. Um, I think another point of this that I want to make, unpacking kind of what you said at the beginning about a point that Aaron made in that sermon, is where you let your thoughts go. Because I think that in today's world, you see it everywhere. You can't go to the gym without seeing a girl who is wearing far less clothes than she should be wearing. And it's not her fault that your mind went lustful. I'm sorry, you can blame her all you want, but it's on you. So that's another
Mhm.
point that I want to make, is it's where you let your thoughts go. That is your fault. And now I'm not saying like you have to like beat yourself up. Again, release that regret of those thoughts if they do go down that path. Restraint leads to reward. Remind yourself, release that regret. But also, I think another big thing that we don't do is we don't put anything in our way. And this is something that you were kind of saying, like, how far am I willing to go? It should be to the ends of the earth. Absolutely anything, and that's easier said than done. My life too. I'm not going to sit here and act like I'm not, I'm perfect over here, because I'm not.
Right.
But
Right.
it's to the point where now, like, and this is kind of going to be our next topic after we get off this David story, but is like I listen to worship music in the gym, like exclusively, like probably 95% of the time worship music. The other 5%, the other 0.2% probably rap music, but it's to the point now where like I'm bringing God into everything. I go to the gym, worship music. I'm driving, worship music. Like just, and that's an easy way to bring God into stuff. But you think when I look at a girl who's in, too tight of spandex or whatever you call it, that I don't have God blasted in my ears. My thoughts aren't going anywhere, man. Like,
Right.
no, it's something that's like and this is something that I did when I struggled with porn, is I made it easier to fall into porn. Like I wanted to, and it was something that I knew what I was doing. And I know we'll get to this later. I'll put a pin in that because we're going to talk about triggers and we're going to talk about going down that path. But yeah, just something where, again, extreme ownership of where you let your thoughts go. Like that is on you, and that is also sin. You having these lustful thoughts and letting them carry out is sin. And another thing I read from James actually yesterday was not taking the action you know you ought to take is a sin.
Mm.
And I think that's another piece there as well, to throw into that. So, I
Yeah.
mean, so much to unpack of David trying to cover this up, the three R's, where you let your thoughts go. A lot of hypocrisy in there. David, Nathan kind of sharing the parable. David getting fired up, like, oh, let's go do something to this guy. Like, he deserves to be punished. Like, it's like there's so much hypocrisy in that, and that applies to our life. Like that is us. We're the hero of our own story, right? We get up on this mountaintop, like, oh, start condemning other people, and it's like you just did that last week, bro. Like, come on. So yeah, I guess any points that you felt needed to be unpacked there too.
My brain just kind of went
So
to
much.
this, like, man, for me, it like so many people want things to happen instantaneously, right? Like, you've been struggling with being overweight, like, like if we always say this, right? Being in this whole like red pill side of Twitter, where it's like if people could take this pill, if you could pay $20,000 for this pill, but you drop 300 pounds and be in the best shape of your life, like people would totally pay for that if that was a thing out there. But no, you have to go to the gym for years. You have to eat clean. You have to sleep well. Like when people start hearing that, they're like, oh man, like I got to do that for years. Like, and that's what's going to finally be the thing. Like, nah,
Yep.
people just want this instant thing. And the I love just the tips and advice that you're given, and that we've talked about here, because it's a process with pornography, especially, man. Like for me, like my thought patterns, especially like as my brain was developing as a teenager, young adult, like were a certain way. Just being, and I was far from God at this time when I was first introduced to it, going through my
Yeah.
teenage years. Um, my thought patterns became a certain way. Now, those aren't set in stone, But I also think you're not just going to change those thought patterns overnight either. Pete Gadonis and I have talked about it. You and I have definitely had these conversations where it's like, when you ask someone like, "Hey, can you go 2 weeks without drinking any alcohol? Can you go 2 weeks without watching pornography?" I bet you a lot of people, most people would probably say like, "Oh yeah, psh, like I got that no problem." Like then you ask the question of like, "All right, well, what if I ask you to go 2 months without drinking or 2 months without watching pornography?" Maybe people are a little bit more hesitant there. And they're like, "Oh, well, I could probably do it, but 2 months is a decent amount of time." Then you get to the point where you're like, well, what if you go 2 years without drinking or watching pornography? And people look at you and they're just like, nah, like I can't commit to that. Like 2 years is such a long time. Like, and it's this really tough concept to grasp of just like, when I throw out there, like, I am not watching pornography again, like forever until I die, until hopefully I get into heaven one day, or I am
Yeah.
living porn free forever. It's like, man, do people look at the rest of your life as a timeline of it's intimidating. It's like, dang, like I've been doing things a certain way for so long, and now I got to flip 180. And that's just where I think God has come into play tremendously for me, where it's like those moments where maybe, I wake up one morning and I'm not perfect, dude. Like I get those thoughts still in my head about pornography, the actresses, all this stuff comes into my head. Um, that's just where you got to renew that daily, pick up the cross, renew your mind, get with guys, get on a Bible study, hop on the monthly addiction calls that we have in the Elevate community and in Discord and stuff, and just surround yourself with the people that will help you just go day to day on that path of who you want to be. That's pretty much where my mind went when with what you were saying.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to how far are you willing to go? Like, yeah, getting on a Bible study is vulnerable. Like, I've been there where I've been intimidated by Bible studies where it's like, if someone says to go to James 3:1, I don't even know what that meant at one point in my life. Like, I don't know how to flip to James 3:1. I'm sitting here looking through the Bible embarrassed, trying to find
Mhm.
James 3:1 or whatever chapter and verse, for example. But it's vulnerable putting yourself out there by reaching out to somebody and saying, hey, I'm struggling with porn, or I'm struggling with this, that, and the other. Like, yeah, it's vulnerable, but it's like, how far are you willing to go? Like, that's the question you have to ask yourself. And I mean, riddle me this: like, how far are you willing to go of getting vulnerable to improve yourself and to build into your vision? It's like, what's more vulnerable, doing that and putting yourself out there, or sitting here and just suffering in your pain and your struggle, like, and just almost like castrating yourself of a future because you won't reach out. Like, that seems silly. Like, that's just, and the world is bred to make you do that. Like, we are not of this world. So like, the world is bred to make you think that reaching out is vulnerable and you shouldn't do it. You are struggling in your pain. You are isolating your pain. Everyone's watching porn. Everyone's doing this. Everyone's having
Right.
sex. Everyone's, everyone. Like, yeah, that's what the world is supposed to be doing. You're supposed to not be of this world, and you're supposed to follow Jesus, the way, the truth, and the life, to get away from that. Like, and that's what community is so powerful. And I think another point from this that we kind of brought up on the call the other night was, and this is something that Gabe delivered in his speech at the House of Steel, speaking on David and Bathsheba, the House of Steel being our October event inside of Elevate. But Gabe said, like, David was not fighting the war. And it's something that we said in the very beginning. Like, this is war. You go to war every single day. And David was not. People were out fighting war on his behalf. He's the leader, he's the king. And if anybody who's a true leader, you understand, if you're a leader, you go first. You're down in the trenches with your people. Like, you are not sitting back behind enemy line, or behind, not behind enemy lines, but behind, war lines and having sex with one of your warriors' wives. Like, come on. Like, that is not a true leader. He knew he wasn't honoring God in his actions in that moment when he was doing that. So it's something where he was letting other people fight war on his behalf. And as much as we talk about community, like these are our own individual wars to fight. We have to be fighting every single day. Yeah, we can be supported, encouraged, we can link arms, but it's like you got to be up there with everybody. You got to be in the fight. And so I think that that's just something to really highlight is he let his guard down. He let his guard down. He stopped fighting his wars. He stopped fighting his battles, and the devil came to him. And we
Yeah.
see what happened there.
Yeah. Yeah. I think geez, it's on the back of I think it's on the back of JR's latest shirt from the House of Steel and just that chapter and verse in Ephesians where you just oh gosh, it was outlined so gracefully and detailed oriented where every piece of a warrior's armor basically was brought up and talked about in terms of just all like this idea of put on your armor of God and then go out into the world and be able to navigate those worldly temptations and things you face. It's a daily putting on of all those different pieces of the armor of God, and then just being able to best protect yourself from all that stuff.
I got it pulled up here. It's actually Ephesians 6:10 through 18 that really talks about
Yeah.
putting on the armor of God.
Yeah.
Kind of just going straight into the armor of what you're saying. Verse 13, Ephesians 6, verse 13. Therefore, put on the full armor of God, so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground, and after you have done everything, to stand. Stand firm then with the belt of truth buckled around your waist, with the breastplate of righteousness in place, and with your feet fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. In addition to all this, take up the shield of faith with which you can extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one. Take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God. Sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God. I think that's powerful. And pray in the Spirit on all occasions with all kinds of prayers and requests with this in mind. Be alert and always keep on praying for all the Lord's people. Man, that's so good. And
No.
oh man, dude, every day I say this. I wish I knew more about the Bible.
Right.
But I've heard maybe you have some biblical, backing to this, but I've heard like talking about take the helmet of salvation, the sword of the Spirit. I've heard like the sword cutting of the flesh, how it being painful as the sword cuts away our flesh from our body. And I think that this is a point I'd like to make. And I don't think we talked about this on the call, but I remember very vividly when I first made the decision to abstain from sex until I get married. I was talking to you on the phone, talked to you about it, talked to Peyton about it, talked to Austin about it, and then I went out to dinner that night with Joe and Gabe. And I tell them, and I'm like, hey guys, I'm making this decision, abstain from sex. And thank God I had people to talk to about it. Don't think I would have ever even come close to, standing my ground in this decision if I didn't have community. But I remember driving back from that dinner after I told them, and kind of the day of making the decision, talking to everybody, like getting my crew around me who's going to support me, like doing all these actions. And I remember I was driving home alone in my car, and I was sad, and it was like painful that I had made that decision. And I think that it really talks about this, like the sword, cutting away our flesh. Like it was painful, and I was sad, and it's because an old version of me had to die. Like a place where I had drawn status, I had drawn ego, I had drawn value, validation, security, all this false bullshit that I was drawing from objectifying women and worldly rankings, let's call it. Like
Yep.
that version of me had to die, and that's like almost like a way of life having to die. Like imagine, on the back burner, if you're ever feeling insecure, invalidated, lacking, status or whatever, and you can just pick up a woman, go have sex, and there you go. You got a short hit of security and validation. Where I was. And so like if that's your default, grab at success, at status, at pride, at whatever, obviously all false sense of pride, worldly sense of all that stuff. Like if you do that for so long, and I'd been doing it for so long, that's gonna hurt to get rid of that. Like that's like your way of life. That's like what you know. So when you're stepping into a new identity, an identity where you're drawing validation from God and honoring Him with your actions and your identity in Him, it's like you got to kill off that worldly self, that past self, and it feels like that when you're doing that. I don't know if you can speak to anything along those lines from your perspective.
Oh, for sure, man, for sure. I think Matt Erickson said it on the call on Monday, but he was just like, this is gonna be the this is a battle, like this is a real spiritual battle when it comes to something like this. And yeah, I think that it you got to be able to have people, which I just love how you brought up kind of your crew that you were able to rely on when it comes to a lot of these decisions, and just having people there to support you and hold you accountable. Um, so yeah, it was I look at pornography and drugs and substances to me were an easy. I'm not going to say like they weren't hard, but like in terms of like difficulty of being able to overcome once and for all, pornography is in its own category for me in terms of the challenge. And then it, like you said, it extends into just that whole topic of objectifying women and lust and how the world wants you to think. It kind of opens up this whole new world. Like it's not just pornography. It's kind of like this whole belief system, heart, like where your heart's at when it comes to just lust and daughters in Christ. Look, you're looking at women on the other half of God's creation when it comes to man and woman. So it just opens up this whole sort of belief system about how you want to view women here on earth.
Amen.
Tough, man, tough.
Amen, dude. Um, but I know we are getting kind of close to time here, and I know we got a lot of stuff we still want to cover. May have to come back for a part two, which I'd totally be down for. But one thing I really want to get into is we kind of talked about, step one, vision, right? And I think kind of step two in this is reprogramming yourself. Um,
Yep,
and I think that this is something that you and I can both speak to personally. And I think that when I kind of shared overcoming porn, from my life, like it was 3 years of hard, intense self development, day in and day out, taking action to better myself and build myself up. That was 3 years of reprogramming myself. And I wish I could say my faith was in all of that, but it really started to just freaking expedite once I brought God in and brought faith in to growing
yep,
myself, of course. And I
yep.
wish I had done that, way sooner. I think that's probably every believer's only regret in life is not believing sooner. Um, but
Amen.
so reprogramming yourself, and it's something that I even delivered a speech on. Like if you're listening to this, you will love this speech. 17-minute speech. Klein Ascension keynote is the thumbnail on my YouTube channel. Go listen to that. 17 minutes, and it's really good. But reprogramming yourself, like from I can't even remember, but from elementary school on, I'm listening to music that's talking about just fuck bitches, get money. Like the premise of like all of these rap songs. We're watching shows. Like there's no TV show that is wholesome and loving and tells you, how to walk as Jesus did. Maybe The Chosen. I haven't watched it yet. It's next on my list, but maybe The Chosen, and maybe there is some out there. I'm just looking in the wrong spots, but you ain't finding them on Netflix, right? So, like, we are just programmed by this world, by what's normal, what's status quo, by social media, by all these inputs that porn is normal, lust is normal, you should be doing these things, you're glorified for doing these things, you get status, pride, ego, all of these things from conquering women, from watching porn, from being able to talk about the things you did to a girl last night. Like, and it's like if you have so like how many years like somebody listening to this, like how many years of programming do you have that is your truth? If I tell you something enough times, you will believe it. And so you have, from all these different facets, all these different outlets, programmed yourself of what is your truth. And this is
Yep.
something Matt and I, like this is huge. Like you have to dig up those old beliefs and reprogram, relay a foundation in which you want to live your life. And the beauty of that is you got the Bible to do that for you. You just get into the Word, start doing worship music, start getting into the church, get around a community of strong believers, aka join Elevate. But like, man, this is just such a big one that people overlook. I'll let you take it from here. I know you got thoughts to share on it, but man, I really want people to hear this one because this is so vital. Like, oh, and I'll make my joke that I didn't make it on the call. I should have made it about programming, but if you're listening to this, like you're on the same belief wave as Matt and I. Like there is a point we are at in today's world where people are being misled and programmed that they are women when they have Johnsons attached to their body. And so if you don't believe in this programming, like you are absolutely wrong because people are being programmed enough times that they are the wrong gender. They are being so confused and misled in today's world that they don't know who they are. And that's what the enemy wants. He wants you to not know who you are. He wants you to question even down to your core. The core of who you are is your own gender. Like
Right.
that's what the enemy wants. And so if you think programming from the devil is not happening, you are absolutely wrong. I'll let you take it, brother.
Yeah, man. Geez, one thing I didn't share it on the call either, but thinking about what one thing that really convicted me just from the pornography standpoint was and just on the brain dopamine side of things, like your brain sees porn the same way it sees physical sex in real life with a woman. Um, but the thing with porn is you are programming your mind to watch other people through a screen engage in sexual intercourse. Like you're not engaging with a woman, man, whatever in real life. Like that is you going to another couple, watching them do their thing, and basically like being a part of that experience almost digitally, like through a screen. So that was one thing that convicted me as I'm stepping into this new guy of just like, hey, being a godly man, just like, dude, like, do I really want to be doing that? Like, no, I'm good.
Yeah.
Um, so that was one thing I just wanted to bring up too. Didn't even mention it on the call, but um, I think for me too, just in terms of that reprogramming, and I don't want, like I said this on the call. I don't to the guys. I don't feel like you need to join a community of 150 dudes, with Elevate and automatically feel like the first thing you got to do is open up about a struggle like this, right? Like there were stages to my journey where the first thing I did where I was like, all right, I'm convicted, this has to go. Boom, I go invest into King David. Like, dude runs an online coaching program for guys to help them quit watching porn. Um, I went through his 31-day program where it was like, okay, I need someone else's input to help me get over this, one-on-one, nobody else. Okay, great, got there. Then it evolves, and it's like, okay, now I can open up to guys like you, a few of the guys in the Elevate community about it. David's coaching support chat that he offers to his clients, or John is his first name, but his community chat. Then maybe like 6 months, a year down the road, now it's like, all right, I can start opening up on social media about it, to
Yeah.
others and sharing my story. So I just want to encourage people, like, don't feel like the first thing you got to do is be like, all right, let me find. That's kind of the social media way of things, where it's like, all right, I need to voice this to hundreds of thousands of people or whatever it may be. Like, no, like find that one person, those couple of people in your family, your pastor, your friend, where you can really open up to about something like this, and just start to grow, and put yourself on that path to the man or woman that you want to become. Um, for me, it was like it was a 13-year battle with it, and I am in like year 2 or 3 now of going down the right path. So it's like this is just a process, man. It's just a process, and however we can obviously be a part of that process with Elevate and the things that we got going on, I would highly encourage you to, reach out to Matt, reach out to myself if you're listening to this and you got questions or just looking for more information on it.
Yeah, bro. Appreciate that shameless plug there. I didn't put him up to that for anybody listening to this. Um, but I think to kind of close out, I know we're running into time. There's a point that you made in that, and we're absolutely going to record a part two here. There's so much more to continue diving into. So you guys just be ready for that. If you're listening to this, like just maybe the next episode's already out. Go click on it. Um, but you said porn is real to our minds, and this is something that has fascinated me recently, and I want to get this across to everyone that's listening because and this goes deeper than porn. This is bigger than porn. This is all inputs. This is any TV show, any movie, anything you're watching. Um, is that your body and your mind cannot discern this in your mind you may say like, hey, this is a TV show, this is not real life, but guess what, it is real to your body. It is your environment, and your body reacts to your environment. That's why when we watch a good movie, shout out Christopher Nolan, we are able to get emotional, get bought in, and get sad when the characters have a loss, and get riled up when the characters have a W. Like, it's because our bodies are reacting to our environment. We are putting ourselves in that scene. And that's the same thing that happens when you watch porn. Your body is reacting to this environment you are placing it in, aka it may just be a screen, but you know, what's a screen the difference from someone in front of you on the bed having sex right in front of you? Like, there's no difference to your body. And so I just want to get that across. Like, even when you watch TV shows, because we're talking about inputs here, it's like your body is buying into that. Your body's getting emotional. It's reacting to that. So like, just consider that, because when I started realizing that, um, I was like, huh, that is powerful. Like, that is extremely powerful to think about that. And we're trying to live stressfully free lives, right? Like, we're trying to live peaceful lives. We're trying to limit, at least I am, I don't know about everybody else, but I'm trying to limit stress. I'm trying to be peaceful. Like, and to know that my body is responding to a TV show, in a movie, in a way that's stressing it out, in a way that's causing it to be filled with drama, or filled with just sadness, or filled with even happiness at times, whatever. But like, I just thought that was such a powerful thing to consider, and to really like sit on and understand. And it really changed my perspective of watching porn, of watching TV, of watching movies. Like, am I saying I'm done watching movies? No. But I'm saying I'm going to be a lot more selective and audit, what I'm watching and when I'm watching it too. Like, the time of day. Like, I don't want to put my body through a 2 hour emotional stress roller coaster right before bed. Like, that's got to be awful on my sleep quality. Apart from, we just like to talk about the blue light of screens causing stress. Think about the environment you just placed your body in that's causing stress. And I know for me, last point I'll make here because we got to jump off, but is I watch porn a lot of times right before bed, right? That stress relief, or whatever you want to justify it as, and then you go right to sleep. It was almost to the point where I couldn't go to sleep unless I watched porn. I know a lot of guys are probably in that spot. That's the spot I was in. So just think about what you're doing to your body, from not just this blue light screen perspective, stress perspective from that point, but from an environment perspective, because you may be able to say this is a screen, but your body's not saying that.
Right. And dude, think about, like, real quick too, just think about when everything's done and dusted and you kind of finish up what you're doing when you're watching porn, your brain
Yeah.
comes out of that. And you look around and you're like, "Oh dang, like I'm in my place, like there's no girl with me." Like your brain remembers all that. Like, and you come back to reality. So think, like, that whole, just like, you get absorbed into this and then you come back out and you're like, oh dang, like that's where the guilt comes in, that's where the regret comes in, that's where the shame comes in. So dude, it's damaging, man. So I'm glad to be able to be here, chatting with you about it.
Part two's coming. Part two's coming. And
Hope
honestly,
so.
this was such a good conversation, bro. Like, this fires me up, and I hope that everyone listening to this like could get a ton of value from this. I know there was a ton of value in this, um, to the point where we are compelled to absolutely record a part two. There's no doubt about it. So yeah, I mean, this is episode one of Raw Faith. I don't know if that's going to be the name. There may be other stuff named that. So, but I'm thinking that's going to be the name. We'll see how it kind of all turns out. It's in the first stages, but it's something where you just got to act fast and stuff like this. Like God is absolutely calling me to get more raw, in my faith from the long form perspective, podcast, YouTube, what have you. So it's something where I don't even have a name, I don't have a logo, I don't have anything, but I know I got value to share with my man Matt. So thank you guys for listening to this. Tune into our second episode. We're going to be going even deeper into scripture, into just more porn stuff, into the triggers. I mean, just so much more to dive into here. So, Matt, appreciate you, bro, and appreciate all you guys listening to this.